Hello, and welcome to my video on tolerance of ambiguity. I'm Dr. Dana Haggard, Professor of Management and curator of this video. Let's get started. Before we discuss tolerance of ambiguity, let's make sure we're clear on what ambiguity is. Here are 3 definitions that I think do a good job of getting the point across. Bing defines ambiguity as the quality of being open to more than one interpretation, or inexactness. The Cambridge Dictionary describes it as a situation or statement that is unclear because it can be understood in more than one way. And finally, Dictionary.com defines ambiguity as doubtfulness or uncertainty of meaning or intention, an unclear, indefinite, or equivocal word, expression, meaning, etc. The picture you see here on this slide is a classic example of an ambiguous figure, and many of you have probably seen it before. Can you see the duck, or the rabbit, or both? The picture is drawn in such a way that either might be true, but without the rest of the picture, we can't tell for sure. There are many other different examples of ambiguous figures, and if you like trying to find the different objects in the pictures, Google will give you many to choose from. Now that we understand about ambiguity, we can talk about one's tolerance of it. Tolerance of ambiguity is defined by Wetton and Cameron as the extent to which individuals are threatened by or have difficulty coping with situations that are ambiguous, where change occurs rapidly or unpredictably, where information is inadequate or unclear, or where complexity exists. Career research defines it as the degree to which an individual is comfortable with uncertainty, unpredictability, conflicting directions, and multiple demands. I also like the definition from the definition.com. Tolerance of ambiguity is the ability to live with a situation that is not clear-cut, where different interpretations of what is happening are possible, and where the outcome is uncertain. It's the ability to accept complexity in human affairs without seeking simplistic solutions. You could also describe tolerance for ambiguity as a person's ability to deal successfully with gray areas where what is happening is not clearly black or white. What are your thoughts on ambiguous situations? Do you find them challenging or stressful? Thinking back to the different definitions of ambiguity, managers face ambiguous situations every day. That is a primary reason why tolerance of ambiguity is important for managers. If managers have difficulty coping with ambiguity, they will be less effective in their jobs. Low tolerance for ambiguity definitely affects the physiological and emotional states of a person in uncertain situations. Think about the last time you were uncertain about something. What emotions did you experience? Did your heart beat faster? And if so, was it from fear or anticipation? Here are some specific examples of relationships between high tolerance for ambiguity and variables of organizational or personal interest. Those with high tolerance cope more effectively with major changes, stress, and conflict. They are more behaviorally adaptive and flexible in ambiguous and overloaded conditions. Tolerance for ambiguity is also related to openness to new information and being more entrepreneurial. And the list doesn't stop there. People who are more tolerant of ambiguity are better transmitters of information, better evaluators of the performance of others, and they enjoy more life satisfaction and positive affect or emotions. All of that sounds great, but it is important to be aware of some potential negatives of having a high tolerance for ambiguity. People with a high tolerance of ambiguity have been found to be more willing to violate ethical norms when they are experiencing negative emotions or negative affect, whereas those with a low tolerance for ambiguity are less likely to violate ethical norms in either personal or organizational settings. Take a second to consider why that might be. Rules are important to those with a low tolerance for ambiguity, and they want them to be followed, whereas those with a high tolerance of ambiguity are more likely to see shades of gray and feel okay operating in those shades. In addition, people with a high tolerance for ambiguity tend to have more difficulty focusing on a single important element of information and in concentrating without being distracted. They also may be more likely to underestimate risk and may appear logically inconsistent to others due to their comfort with gray areas. How is tolerance of ambiguity measured? Well, you see two scales listed here: Budner's tolerance of ambiguity scale and McDonald's revision of Rydell and Rosen's tolerance of ambiguity scale. Although both Budner's and McDonald's measures are decades old, they are still considered acceptable. Rydell and Rosen had a slightly longer scale, and McDonald shortened it and showed that the measure was still acceptably valid and reliable. Budner's scale is longer, and his work focuses on not only an overall tolerance of ambiguity, but he breaks down its component parts. Those components help us to understand the concept better and to be able to improve our tolerance for ambiguity. We will examine those components in the next slide. According to Budner, tolerance of ambiguity combines our attitudes towards the novel, the complex, and the insoluble. Let's break each of those down. Novelty refers to things that are new or unfamiliar, so your novelty score measures your attitude towards unfamiliar information or situations. Our attitude toward new things is an important aspect of tolerance of ambiguity because encountering new situations means by default that we don't know everything about it and we don't yet know how to interpret it. The second component is complexity. The complexity score measures our tolerance for multiple, distinctive, or unrelated information. In other words, how do you do with complicated situations that have many different moving parts? If you are receiving multiple pieces of apparently unrelated information in a particular situation, are you able to juggle that inflow of information, or does it make you feel overwhelmed? Lastly, insolubility. Insolubility refers to our attitude towards problems that are difficult to solve. It might be difficult to solve for several reasons, such as solutions not being obvious, information not being readily available, or the problem's components seem totally unrelated to each other. Are you someone who likes crossword or Sudoku? There are easy versions and then there are difficult versions. When asked to solve a problem, what is your attitude toward it? Again, do you feel challenged or overwhelmed? An important aspect of using Budner's framework is that it allows us to focus in on just what it is about uncertainty that makes us uncomfortable. If we can pinpoint that, then we can work to improve our tolerance by working through the dimension which makes us the most uncomfortable. And now to the most exciting part of the lecture. What can we do to improve our tolerance of ambiguity? The more often you encounter something, the more familiar it gets, and usually the less threatening it becomes. I recommend the EERR method. It uses the small wins mastery experiences approach, but starts with exposure or observation, and then moves to personal experience and calls for reflection and repetition. This method is one of many and applies regardless of which component you are working on: novelty, complexity, or insolubility. And I'll make an important point that tolerance does not mean enjoyment. You might find that you never enjoy insoluble problems, but the point is that you reduce the amount of discomfort and distress that you feel when placed in ambiguous situations so that you can do what you need to do to achieve a positive outcome. Increasing your exposure or observation of anything will start to take the mystery out of it. It might never disappear, but some of the picture will come into better focus. So watch a YouTube video on something new, something complex, or on a problem that seems insoluble. If possible, pay attention to how others in your environment behave in ambiguous situations. Or when you're watching a movie or a television show, look and see if you can identify whether or not a situation is ambiguous, and watch the reactions of the characters. Who seems to do well, and who seems to become a mess? Next, move to experiencing something new, complex, or insoluble for yourself. Intentionally choosing to put yourself in this position will increase your feelings of control and help deal with the initial discomfort. Start small and occasionally, and then either move to something bigger or do the small thing more frequently. After each intentional experience, reflect on it. Did things go as you expected? If so, why? And if not, why not? What did you learn, and how can you apply it to the next time? Also, as you experience unintentional ambiguous situations, reflect on what happened, how you felt, and what you did so that you can learn from it and know what to do better next time. And then make sure there is a next time. When I say repeat, I don't mean you have to do the exact same activity, though you can if you want. What I recommend is that you again intentionally choose a situation that is ambiguous and go through the exposure, experience, reflection, repeat cycle. The steps that I've outlined here are ones that you can use as a general idea or guideline for improving your tolerance of ambiguity, regardless of which dimension you choose to work on. However, what follows on the next few slides are some specific examples of things that you can do to improve each of the different components of tolerance for ambiguity. So here are some suggestions if your difficulty is with novelty. Watch videos or read about a new type of food, then eat at a restaurant you've never been to before or cook a meal you've never tried before. I also had a student who went to a restaurant and instead of ordering for herself, she let the person she was eating with choose the meal for her. Map different routes to work and then drive them. See what new things you see on the way. You could watch a video or read an article about fashion and then visit a store you've never visited before and buy a shirt in a color you wouldn't normally wear. And of course, you must wear it. You could also watch travel videos on places you've never visited and then plan, and if you can, take a vacation there. These suggestions have actually come to me through students. When they have decided that they wanted to work on their novelty, these are some things that they decided to do to help get them started. Remember when planning your activity that this is something that you're going to start doing on a continuing basis. Remember the small wins and mastery experience strategies. The point is you start small and over time you improve. Here are some suggestions for working to improve your tolerance of complexity. Watch a video or read an article about a complex task. For example, assembling a model airplane or building, then try assembling one for yourself. Or, if you really want to take things up a notch, watch a video on assembling IKEA furniture and then try to build some. Watch a video or read a recipe about making hard candy, then try doing it for yourself. Watch a foreign language film using the subtitles, then download a foreign language app and start with 1 or 2 lessons a week and then increase that number. Watch videos or read about a foreign country you've never visited. Plan a trip and take it if you can. I am a huge fan of international travel. I think everyone should go. Not only will it help your tolerance for ambiguity, because you will be working on novel, complex, and sometimes problems that seem insoluble, but also because it helps you to have more understanding of people who come here from other countries and the challenges they face as international students or as citizens adapting to how things are new here for them. Read the Wall Street Journal and start working the Monday crossword for a few weeks, and then progress to the weekend puzzles. Take up Sudoku. Try to solve a Rubik's Cube. Watch balanced documentaries on difficult-to-solve social issues. When I say balanced documentaries, sometimes documentaries are labeled documentaries, but the person making them does have sort of an agenda, so it's important to watch more than one documentary on the same topic. Read a review of a movie that has an ambiguous ending, and then find other movies with ambiguous endings and watch them. This is one of those things that a student suggested to me in one of his assignments that he did to try to help improve his difficulty with insolubility. He found that as long as he knew that a movie was going to have an ambiguous ending, he wasn't bothered by it. But if he watched a movie and it ended ambiguously and he didn't know in advance it would end that way, that's when he had trouble. And so he learned that as long as he recognized the ambiguity, that he could deal with it. And lastly, search for publicly available databases. When it comes to searching for publicly available databases, choose ones that are somehow related to your work. Finding websites and resources in advance that can help you will help reduce the stress when you encounter a problem that's going to take some research. If you've already done some in advance, that will help you be prepared and reduce your stress levels. And now some questions for self-reflection. When was the last time you were confronted by an ambiguous situation at work or home? How did you react? Which, if any, dimensions of tolerance of ambiguity do you struggle with? Think about your current or most recent boss. How would you describe their tolerance for ambiguity? Is it different than yours? And if so, how might the difference affect your relationship? That wraps up this video on tolerance of ambiguity. If you have any questions about this concept, please post them to the Student Questions discussion board in Blackboard. Chances are, if you have a question, another student has that question too. If you're intellectually curious and would like to learn more about tolerance for ambiguity, please stay tuned for the sources and additional resources slide for this video. Thanks for watching.